Hey guys, welcome to another Ultimate Edge webinar. This is a continuation of the webinar we had just last week with Brian Bouchard, who's a real estate investor down in Tacoma, and Jason Anderson, who's a real estate attorney. And we chatted about some new laws that just became impacted in effect with Tacoma, Washington, that municipality, and how they're going to impact things. I'm going to start off this little webinar with where we ended before, guys. We ended with, what do you think landlords should do to prepare themselves, both short-term and long-term, to adapt to the new laws? And actually, Jason, I think it would be good for our YouTube audience who may not have seen the other video, if you could just speak to what the new laws are, first of all, and then tell us what you think landlords might be able to do to deal with them, please.
There's a couple major ones down in Tacoma that are catching landlords by surprise. An initiative passed by about 300 and change voters. And the biggest changes is that there are no evictions during winter. And if there are school-aged children in the home, there are no evictions during the school year. It also applies if any of the people being evicted are educators, and a couple other little categories. So that's going to be, it's going to be situational, but that could be a very ugly surprise for some landlords down in the Tacoma area.
Those are in effect now, Jason, is that correct?
They're in effect, became effective December 8th.
All right. Brian Bouchard was the guy that alerted me to this. Brian and I have known each other for 20-some years. He's a real estate investor with how many doors, Brian, do you have down in Tacoma area?
30-something.
Okay. So, Brian, what's your perspective here? What should a landlord do, a good landlord who wants good tenants and within all of the legal ways and in the right manner? What should they do to prepare themselves now and maybe long-term over time for adapting to the new laws?
Well, always doing your due diligence up front in the way of good screening is the best way to protect yourself in the long run. But in order to attract a good pool of prospective tenants that might meet a higher bar of criteria, means that it's a good idea for people to get their units in shape by that extra coat of paint, shining up the floors, possibly replacing some fixtures, those kinds of things that will attract people. There's a lot of competition out there, and in fact, in Tacoma, in one particular area, there are several hundred new units coming online that will be a lot of competition in a certain price range. So make sure your units, especially the mom and pops, make sure that your units are up to snuff, and then raise that criteria so that those folks who have a propensity to not pay their bills, whether it be rent or anything else, would be screened out.
Okay, so higher quality units get higher quality tenants, and then screen appropriately so you get higher quality tenants, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there is, correct. And there is one other thing, offer discounts either through the entire term of a contract or maybe just incentives to move in. There is a lot of things that you can do. You can be creative to attract a lot of new people.
Jason, you want to add to that? Anything at all? What landlords should be doing?
Well, yeah. I mean, for the first stage is you do your screening. You try to get the best tenants in that you can, because the cost of getting the wrong tenant in there has gone up. And then to mitigate, you act on a bad tenant fairly quickly, so you can make sure that you can complete the eviction during the times of the year when it's available.
It makes good sense. Yeah. By the way, what are the winter months? What's that defined as?
November 1st to April 1st. And Jason brought up a great point that a lot of people are going to miss last time, in that you have to be prepared to file that eviction, maybe file that eviction in advance, so that you hit the window of opportunity and you don't miss it and get stuck with another year of these of the deadbeat tenants.
Yep, I remember that good thought. All right, let's switch gears. Let's look at the other side of the coin, guys. What about tenants? How is this going to impact tenants releasing in Tacoma, do you think, short-term, long-term, and what should good tenants do to convince landlords that they're good tenants and are not going to take advantage of the situation?
Well, I guess I'll take a stab at that first. Tenants that will be affected will be tenants with tenants that I consider to be high-risk tenants. There are two types of high-risk tenants: those with assistance and those without. Those without are going to have trouble finding a place because of these insane new laws. Have a lot of landlords gun shy about renting, taking any chances on anyone now. Where I don't know who these people are that thought that this was a good idea, but all it really does is eliminate available housing to the folks that need it the most. But the people who have subsidized housing of some sort, typically those subsidized housing outfits will pay through these eviction moratoriums. And because they do pay, then it's not an issue. Now, what can good tenants do? Keep their credit in good shape. Prove to people that you pay your bills. Stick with your job. People who have 4 years with one job or one employer or more, that's seasoned employment. Landlords love that. Also, people who stay with their landlords for 2 years or more, that's seasoned residential history. And landlords love that as well. Why do people move if they've been someplace for such a long period of time, or at least 2 years or more? And the reasons vary widely. But the longer they stay, or at least even complete the terms on their leases, the better they look. So we screen for 4 things. We screen for credit, criminal, residential, and employment history. And now with there were many attempts to try to include not allowing criminal history and even, believe it or not, social security numbers to be included in screenings. That did not pass this time around, but essentially what they would be asking landlords to do is just take a risk on anybody, regardless, and then who knows, maybe they'll pay, maybe they won't. That's unrealistic for landlords to do, and it's unrealistic for a segment of the market to survive. So tenants who have good histories now, keep going in that direction. Your credit score, if it's not, what is it, John? 850 is the highest, correct?
Yeah, right in there someplace.
Yeah. So I mean, not a lot of people have an 850 credit score, so they can move
Sure.
up. They can keep moving up. They can keep moving up. Even if it's a point at a time, keep doing that. Stay with your employer, stay with your landlord. Explain why you left. Make sure you fill out everything in the screening form, or when you review the screening form, make sure that the prospect has filled out every part of the screening form. Don't let any blank spaces go. Ask a lot of questions. Do a drive-by of their current residence to find out, what does it look like, or what were they willing to settle for the last time. Make those phone calls for references all the way around. Here's one that just frustrates me to no end. Sometimes I will call to get an employment reference, and I get a thing called, well, they won't talk to me. HR won't talk to me, and or their supervisor won't talk to me, and they refer me to a thing called a one number. Okay, well, you have to subscribe to that, first of all. And if you don't do a lot of screenings, then it's a lot of money for nothing. Can you pass that on? to the prospect. And in some jurisdictions you can, but in Tacoma, there is a limit. And even the state of Washington's LTA says that there's certain guidelines, or in other words, it has to be reasonable. And so one number really doesn't work for most small landlords. So if I can't verify references, I don't rent to them. Now, in the new code, and I think this is actually one of the fairest things in the new code, that you have to tell them about adverse actions. So if they were denied for something, then you get back to them and you tell them. And I think that's good, because then you have an opportunity to fix stuff. However, you know, when you, I mean, I don't know how you fix some stuff, right? Some stuff just isn't fixable, at least not in the short term.
Right.
So anyway, you have to get back to them and let them know what happened there, and then you can perhaps make deals. So if and the Washington RCW has a form at the bottom. I don't know, Jason probably knows a little bit more about where to find this. I used to have it up here. It had the RCW at the bottom has a kind of a template for the questions that you should be asking, and in there it says, you know, we are denying your application, but you can fix it by having a cosigner, or by providing more of a down or a deposit, or you know, something of this effect.
Okay.
And on the other hand, and this is where it kind of gets a little tricky, if you take more of a deposit, you are required to put that on a payment plan. Well, if this person is not acting in good faith and they say, oh, okay, let's put it on a payment plan, and then they don't come through with the payment plan, and that happens November 1st, not April 1st, well, then you're screwed anyway. So yeah, so I like to get that stuff up front. If they're telling me, oh, I need a payment plan, I might be going with number 2
Got it.
on the list.
All right, Jason, comments on any of that, and your thoughts, please, about tenants.
Yeah, so if you look back at some of the horror stories about trying to rent in San Francisco, you had people that would be putting together financial portfolios that they'd show potential landlords, and it may be the tenants have to start thinking that direction, where they go ahead and they organize their financial history and, you know, put together a neat, clean application. Typically, if you're neat and organized in one area, you're a better risk. And so if you go to a landlord with, you know, clean financials that are ready, you know, maybe some tax returns, some pay stubs, all that sort of thing, in a way that looks organized, I think that's going to be some points in your favor.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
Yep. Yeah, so you know, I would summarize this, guys, that we do loans. When we do loans, we scrutinize everything, credit and income and assets and all of that. This is just when you're a landlord, it's kind of a minor version of that. You want to make sure the person can pay. That's why the long job history and income is important here. And credit's really important. Keep your credit good. So if you want to be a homeowner sometime, you can do that. But also, if you need to rent, and landlords are being very careful about who they're choosing, it'll help you out. All right, guys, I'm going to move to our main topic here. I'm going to start with you, Jason. So there is a lot of talk about people who are moving into homes and squatting there, and then you can't get them out. This is not just landlords who are renting them. These are vacant properties that people find, and they scoot on into them, and then they're there for a lifetime. And the person, there's just no way at all, I've heard, to get them out of there. And I kind of wonder about that, Jason. Is that true? How risky is this for something that's a vacant house?
It's risky. Forever is not what the risk is, but if you wait on it, it can turn into a giant headache. Let me go ahead and outline what I mean by waiting on it.
I just want to interject, Jason. It sounds to me as soon as they move in, I have a giant headache anyway.
Yeah, but there are degrees.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. So, so if you get them quickly, most sheriffs will have most counties, if you look up the local sheriff, they will have a trespass form. And if you go ahead and fill out the county trespass form for that sheriff, the sheriff will go out to the property, determine whether or not the people squatting there have any kind of rights. And if you've moved quickly enough, they will remove them from the property for trespassing.
And
now,
how quickly enough is quickly enough, Jason? How soon do you need to do that?
Okay, so here's the biggest deadline, and there's a difference between the law and what is enforced. Okay, so in King County, if somebody has been there longer than 30 days, the sheriff takes the position that that person has, by acquiescence, may have a tenancy right of some sort. They will say, we consider this a civil matter. We will not go ahead and remove these people.
Okay.
So basically, you got to think that you got a 30-day clock that's ticking as far as not having to file a lawsuit, and there's going to be delays getting in contact with the sheriff. There's going to be delays for the sheriff getting out there. It's the sort of thing where you've got to keep up with it and act as soon as somebody's in the property.
Okay, so stage one, within 30 days, you file the form that they're trespassing, and there's a high probability that the sheriff will help you out and get them out. Is that correct?
That's correct. It does to some extent depend upon how busy the jurisdiction is. You're a little bit at their mercy, but you know, if you're following their procedures, their intention is to help you out, but the clock is ticking down.
All right, and you go past 30 days, that it then turn into just a landlord-tenant issue at that time?
Yeah, it's technically not, but what it means is that the sheriff isn't going to help you until you get a court order. So you're going to have to file the lawsuit. You're probably going to have to serve one of the statutory notices before you file the lawsuit. Then you got to file the lawsuit, and you're in the time frame that I talked about, where if everything goes perfectly, maybe you can get it done in 33 days. But in practice, it usually takes much longer than that. And then you're at the end of the calendar for the sheriff for however long they're getting to evictions.
All right. And then Jason, one more question for you before we leave here with you and go to Brian. I've heard that squatters who are very clever can do things such as show that they paid a utility bill or something like that for the home or something like that, and then it's more difficult to deal with them and get them out. Is that true, or what? Is there a different level of risk with any tenant that's kind of clever and figures out ways to skirt this and make it last longer?
So basically, the issue that this tenant would be trying to create is something that would indicate that you let them in the property,
right?
Or you acquiesce to them being in the property, right? So if you allowed them in the property and then they stayed despite you telling them to leave, they're not a squatter, they're a holdover, because you had permitted them in the property, and sure, your permission is ended, but they did have a right to be there at one point. So they might be trying to point to a utility bill or something like that to try to create the impression to the sheriff that maybe you must have let them do that because they've been around long enough to, you know, have paid a utility.
And does the absence, Jason, of a written lease agreement mean anything?
Not really. I mean, a verbal month-to-month tenancy is perfectly enforceable.
Okay.
Right. So if it's a he said, she said, the sheriff is kind of acting like a mini judge for a minute. But the sheriff is not interested in being sued if they make a mistake. And so if there's a good enough story that they hear, they're likely to say, okay, we're going to wash our hands of it, go get a court order.
Okay. So if I would summarize what you just said, as long as you're quick and you can use the trespassing path, you can get them out fairly quick with the aid and help of the sheriff, as long as they're available and how you get within 30 days. After 30 days, it becomes more of a landlord tenancy kind of thing, and you just follow the regular eviction process, and you should be able to get them out within the regular kind of time, and it could be longer, as we talked about last time, depending on how things go and how they react and all of that.
Yeah, and that 30 days is not in the law anywhere. It's just kind of practice for
Got
it. Some of the sheriff's offices.
All right. So we shouldn't run away, catch our hair on fire and run away with our hands in the air going, oh my goodness, I have a squatter, there's nothing I can do. There are things you can do.
Yeah, there are things you can do. It's a headache, and nobody wants to have to pay money to get rid of somebody who shouldn't be there, but
Yeah.
that's what you're trying to avoid. So you've got a collection of remedies.
All right, fair enough. Brian, we talked prior to the recording in the webinar here that you've had some experience with this.
Yes, I have. But again, it's like screening tenants that your best bet is to protect yourself up front. And competent property management would never allow this to go 30 days. So to go back to your utility bill example there, I would highly suggest that when a unit becomes vacant, especially units that have a history of taking a little bit longer to rent than say others, that you put the utilities, go ahead and turn the utilities, at least the electricity, on in the landlord's name. That takes that possible scenario off the table. But there's some advantages to this. One of them is to make sure that you have that in the city of Tacoma, for example, which has the most crazy Landlord-tenant Act laws currently. They have the sheriff's, or excuse me, the Tacoma Police Department has a no trespassing order that they keep on file, and you do one per address, and then put no trespassing signs in the windows of the vacant unit. In addition to that, since you have the utilities on, always leave a light on, and get yourself a very inexpensive security camera system called Blink. Blink is a wireless system, and you can put the module that it communicates with that goes between the cameras and your router in a place outside of the unit, and then stick a camera which is motion sensitive and sends alerts to your phone somewhere, where they would have to trigger it almost immediately upon entry. Then exactly the moment that somebody tries to break and enter. So then say they do, then what do you do? Be prepared to have someone or yourself get down there immediately, because the more time that you let go by, the worse it gets for you. So then you get there and you see that they're in, and maybe they didn't break the door enough to where it looks like they were breaking and entering. Maybe they're good at picking the door locks. And you get there and they say, oh, no, I live here. And you know darn well that they don't live there. And you just open up the door and walk in, and you say, oh, okay, well then you need to leave right now, or the police will come, and you make the phone call. And it's always best to do this in pairs. Don't go by yourself, have somebody go with you. So somebody calls while you keep an eye on the situation and you're not distracted. Okay, if they will not leave, then you can begin to pick up their stuff and take it outside for them. And if they get in your way, then that's even more beneficial to you when the police finally do show up. But let's say, for example, then it goes for a day. They get in there, and for some reason you didn't get an alert, and you go there the next day to do some work because you're going to turn the apartment, get it ready for showing, and you find someone there. I would, and I haven't had to do this yet, but I would definitely do it. I would say, oh, okay, well, I'll be back in just about 5 minutes. And I would go and I would get some chairs and a sleeping bag and these things. And I would say, well, we'll just live together here then. And I would make it so uncomfortable for them to be there, because you know that they're probably there to do drugs and other illegal activity, that they will want to leave.
Brian, I want to pause you for a moment.
Mhm.
Jason, can you comment on that? Is there anything that worried you at all from a legal perspective that Brian was saying there, going in, saying and go out, taking their stuff, bringing it outside, and anything at all? Is he well within his rights?
Well, he is, but there's okay. So there's a small risk that the squatter, will say that Brian was stealing his stuff, right, when he picked it up.
Right.
I don't think that's a very large risk, but that is a complaint that could be leveled. In most cases, I think it would be a risk worth taking, but there is that risk there.
Okay. Other than that,
Well,
it's all good.
I would, you kind of have to be a little bit fearless. You can't be meek doing this. I mean, you have to be willing to do this. It's your property. I mean, to me,
I would say you have to be a little fearless to go in there and take your sleeping bag and say,
well, I mean, the chances of you sleeping there with them is extremely low. They're going to be so uncomfortable, they're going to leave.
Fair enough.
But you have to be a pretty good actor, and you have to make it appear as though you're going the distance on this. And for me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it doesn't scare me. I'm so pissed off at the whole situation that I can't wait to get in there to get rid of them.
Do you carry a baseball bat when you go in there, Brian?
How can I answer that, John? That won't upset
You can choose not to answer it if you want, Brian. Brian, do you have any actual stories around this where you were forced to do any of the stuff you're talking about at all? Were you in situations like that?
Yeah, right around the beginning of COVID is when I saw a few of these incidents. I had one lady, we had just, the tenant, we had a tenant who had moved out. The tenant was a reasonable tenant, no problems with the tenant. But apparently they had either shared their key with someone who was facing homelessness. And so they gave that key to that person. And we had had it on the schedule to go in there and turn the apartment. So the next morning I went in there, and to my surprise, I walk in and, no big deal. And I go to one of the bedrooms, and all of a sudden there's this lady there, and she's got her bed there, her clothes there. She's sleeping there. I didn't find any drugs, but she said, oh yeah, well, I was told that I could stay here. I had to tell her, I'm sorry, ma'am, but you can't stay here. We're going to be working here in about 5 minutes. You have to leave. And apparently she could not have brought all that stuff in by herself. So she had help. And so I just simply said, well, you got to go. I'll give you a couple minutes. Well, can I grab some things? And I said, of course. Grab as much of your stuff as you can. And so she did. And she walked out. And as soon as she walked out, that is my opportunity to shut the door. And so I shut the door, locked it, gathered up all the rest of her stuff, and stuck it out on the planting strip. And it stayed there for a day, and then 2 days, and 3 days. And pretty soon it became apparent that she wasn't coming back for it. So we just loaded it in the truck and took it to the dump.
Let me pause you one more moment, Brian. So we're at the half-hour mark, guys. Anybody who on the webinar here, there's a fair amount of people. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box. We're going to go a little bit longer here, so I can ask Brian and Jason any questions there. So I'll monitor that. Questions around what Brian just said, Jason and Brian both. You're the landlord. You take the stuff, you put it on the porch. How long can it sit there before you can get rid of it? What's the law around that?
Okay, hold on first of all, because we didn't put it on the porch. We didn't keep it on the premises. We put it on the planting strip, which is government property. So,
okay, got it.
So at that point, it's anybody's. And if they don't come back for it right away, that's their problem. But it's not on the premises, and so they can't claim any kind of homesteading, whatever.
Right. Jason, any comments on that? Is that the proper way to handle it, to what Brian did?
Yeah. So the risk you're going to face is they say that, in all that junk, my grandma's jewelry was there, right? So what I would do is I would take a picture of it, and ideally take a picture of it before you take it out. But that's the biggest risk you face. As long as they haven't been a tenant, you can put it out on the street, and it's definitely, and then you just protect yourself from an accusation that you took something.
Okay, good.
Well, and also to what Jason said there, if they say, "Oh, I've got grandma's jewelry," any competent officer is going to say, "Well, do you have any proof of that?" And of course, when they can't provide that, then it becomes questionable there as well.
Reasonable. All right, Brian, continue. Any other thoughts? Any other activities you've had to deal with?
Well, I've had to deal with something like that several times. And it's always cleared up immediately because I took care of it immediately. If I were to be afraid to do this, or for whatever reason could not be there to do it, and it went on day after day after day, well, it just gets harder and harder and harder every day you wait. You need to be there immediately. And the best thing about the blink camera system is that it tells you immediately what's happening so that you can be there as soon as possible.
Yeah, that makes good sense. So Jason, you were commenting on this, and
I'm sorry. There's one other thing. So there's two thoughts about this that I've heard from other property managers, and that is, do you take all the window coverings off and show an exposed empty apartment? Well, you could do it that way, because then if you drive by and see things up covering the windows, something's up. But a lot of people will say, or will think that, keeping the windows covered and making it look like it's lived in is the better way to go. I think that it kind of depends on the unit, how it's situated in a building or on a property. Right now I have one unit that is covered and one unit that is wide open. In the case of the unit that's wide open, it is on the ground floor. I put no trespassing signs in the windows, turn a light on, keep the camera where they can see it from outside through the window.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that, Jason, from you, the no trespassing signs. Does that change things, the fact that Brian puts them up because people shouldn't be trespassing on your property anyway without the sign? Does he have a stronger stance or anything like that because he put the signs up?
Slightly, right? So what I talked to you about is it. Right, you're looking not at what the law is. You're looking at what is it going to take to get the sheriff to get this person out if I can't scare them out.
Right.
And what it takes is for the sheriff to be confident that they're not supposed to be there, and that they're not there by permission and just staying after their permission was revoked. So if you've got no trespassing signs on there, that makes it that much more unlikely that the officer is going to think that maybe you gave him permission previously.
Yeah, makes good sense. Pretty smart stuff. Brian, what other good tips of the trade dealing with squatters have you dealt with or you come up with here?
Get it rented as fast as possible. but at the same time, make sure you do your due diligence. Don't take anyone because you want to make that monthly rent goal. Now, especially in Tacoma. Now, in other places, maybe you've got some latitude there, but in Tacoma, you have to be extremely careful now because of these moratoriums that I believe will eventually go away. I don't believe they're constitutional, but there's a road that we have to go down to get to that point. And in the meantime, it looks like at least we're going to go through one more round of these moratoriums before anything gets done. So just be very, very careful up front. Raise those requirements to the point where you're comfortable, and don't be afraid to pass on people.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and share a story. I have a building owner down in Lakewood He ran into some trouble with the city. The building was shut down because it was not fit for occupancy, and it was that way for about 4 years. In 2022, a number of homeless people started to break into the building, and they set up beds in there. He took his time about getting them out because this was a building that was losing him money every year, and he was waiting to get a chunk of money so he could repair it and get it back into operation. Eventually, the city leveled some additional charges, tried to bring an action to tear the building down as a nuisance to the neighborhood. So he finally got himself organized and got some people in there, chased out the squatters that were in there, and started to clean it up. And they came back and they set the building on fire. And the entire roof burned off the building, and he was not in a position where he could negotiate with the city of Lakewood anymore about the quality of that building, and lost it.
Oh my goodness.
So
Was it uninsurable?
it was uninsured. I don't know.
Lots of lessons in that story.
Yes.
Absolutely. Guys, there are a couple of questions from the audience I want to ask you. So one is there any truth to if they are there for 3 days and receive a piece of mail there, even though they may have sent it to themselves by landlord-tenant, can you formally evict them?
You have to formally.
Oh, you have to formally evict them? Question mark. Is that true? No trespassing. So I think here's what it is, Jason. They're there short term, but they read this again. They had a piece of mail delivered there, so now you have to formally evict them because the mail's delivered rather than the trespassing situation with the sheriff.
Yeah. So basically, it's just the question is just, is the sheriff going to feel comfortable that they're not making a mistake when they evict the person? If you've got enough other indications, if you've moved fast enough, the mail is by itself is not going to be enough to change the situation. But it's basically a persuasion exercise of, deputy, this has been a short time, this is vacant, they're not here, and if you got enough indications to show that yeah, you never let this person in, they'll go ahead and evict them. Well, it's not an eviction, they'll just trespass them from the property.
So per Brian's strategy, he put the no trespassing signs in the windows. You should probably take pictures of those with the date on them, because what's going to happen potentially is the squatter moves in, grabs all the signs, gets rid of them. Now you have no evidence when the sheriff is there that the no trespassing signs were in the window to begin with.
Yeah.
Comment on that, guys, either of you?
Well, I think that's a good strategy. But with regard to the mail, every day that you go there to check your property, which would be a good idea to at least pass by, take a moment just to open up the mailbox and grab the mail.
That's a pragmatic landlord speaking to you there, guys.
Yeah. And I will say that, if an officer is there and they're hearing a story, and they ask you, when's the last time you were here, landlord? If you can say it was yesterday or 2 days ago, he's a lot more likely to take action than, yeah, 2 months ago I came by.
Good point. Good point. Okay, guys, another question from the audience. We allow subletting in one of our homes. The main tenant is the only one on the lease. She is only supposed to have 2 others in the house, but she has at least 3. What is the easiest way to ask her to leave as she's in violation? Question, if she leaves and the others don't, how do we proceed? I think that's for you, Jason. And Brian, you can comment on after Jason. How's that?
Yeah. So it's you have to handle it like an everyone problem, even though you're trying to get rid of one person. The tenant that's permitted to be there essentially they're the person that is violating their agreement with you. And so your 10-day notice that you're not complying with the lease agreement is going to be directed at the tenant that you let into the property, even if you're trying to get rid of a subtenant that you don't have an agreement with.
Jason, do you need the names of the subtenants? If you don't know who they are, can you just say subtenant A and subtenant, Jane Doe and Joe Doe and all of that? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so on all of my notices, I have the names and then I say and occupants.
Okay. All right. Brian, any comments on that? Have you ever faced
Yeah.
that situation?
So in our lease agreements, we do not allow subletting. Additional occupants is a difficult thing to prove. Who's a guest and who's an occupant. The only way that we've had some success with that is by issuing the 10-day notice, but also by having our video camera system, which shows people entering or exiting at certain times. And enough of that is evidence to suggest to law enforcement and/or a court that we do indeed have an additional occupant here who is not on the lease. And then the lease, our particular leases have specific language in it that states, who's supposed to be there and who can't be there, including that with regard to pets. Now, one of the additional occupants is like one of 3 of our most abused clauses in our agreement. Smoking and pets are the other 2. And we just had a situation occur where this guy literally would come and go. He would be there for like a month or 2, then he'd leave. We'd give him the notices, and then he'd come back, and then we'd give the notices, and then come back, and that kind of thing. I believe it could be, Jason can confirm this, but I believe that it's Washington RCW, but at least in Tacoma, if you get 4 10-day, if you post 4 10-day notices within a 12-month period, you can begin the eviction process for the same thing. In other words, additional occupant 4 times. Make sure that you list or that you post these notices and do not wait. So if you post notice on the 1st and they don't comply, and you can see in the videos that, or even just being there, that this person is coming and going, then on the 11th, you're doing the 2nd one. And then on the 21st, you're doing the 3rd one. And then on the 1st of the next month, you've got the 4th one. Because it's going to take you longer than that to go through the court system on this, in addition to those notices. And who knows, maybe that person was already there for a while before you issued the 1st one. So you might be in it for 2-3 months. So don't let any time pass.
Yeah.
Notice.
I hear that theme from both of you guys. So we're way past the end of our normal webinar, guys, but I want to give you each about 2 minutes to kind of wrap it up and give me any closing comments, in particular related to squatters and what you may have learned and how to deal with it. But if you really want to comment on the Tacoma laws because we missed something there, feel free to do so. So Brian, you're up, and then Jason, you can close it out, please.
Well, there was a number of changes to the LTA in the city of Tacoma. I guess now there's 3: state, county, and city. The city of Tacoma is the most egregious of all of them, and probably in the nation. These 2 moratoriums, the student in home and the winter cold weather winter moratorium, have the potential to end the rental housing market for small landlords. Small to me is 50 or less doors. If just 10% or, heaven forbid, more, decide that for whatever reason they just don't want to pay rent, the chances of you collecting that rent are minuscule, number one. You're still, if it's a singly metered building, then you're on the hook for the utilities too. Just be very, very careful about that and fight this. If you're in Tacoma, fight this with all you've got to make your voice heard, that this is not only unfair, it's unconstitutional.
Fair enough.
Okay,
Jason?
yeah. The closing comment I would say is that you'll hear people talk about passive income, right? And people will talk about renting property as passive income. There's really no such thing as passive income. There's income you work harder for, income you work less hard for, but it's never truly passive income. And so if you got a property that's empty, you've got to be proactive to keep your eyes on it, and you've got to be proactive as far as who you're putting into it, and you don't view it as a passive investment.
Okay. Guys, this is one of the most informative ones we've had for a long time, so I really appreciate both you guys coming on. Jason Anderson, attorney, Brian Bouchard, a real estate investor. Thanks to both of you for your thoughts and your experience and comments on this. And thanks for bringing it up, Brian. I wasn't even aware of the law until you gave a call, so thanks for doing that too.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it, guys. I don't see any other comments, so I guess we're good for the day. Thanks for being with us.